All right. So, Joy, just tell me
Mm,
a little bit. Well, of course, you just told me a little bit about how long you've been in the game, right? Started
yeah,
with your brother's methodology when he started teaching, etc., or when he started the methodology. You've been into
yeah,
the constructivist methodology. Very interesting. Seems like this is
yes.
uh, I guess, a growing necessity, right? People needing new methodologies that work with like real life experience instead of just
Yes.
like boxing all of the learning into a book. So, um, for anyone who's watching now, why don't you tell people who you are, where you're from, your deal with English and with teaching or with learning as well?
All right, okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Joy. It really is my name. It's not a nickname. I often get called Joyce or stuff like that when people first meet me, and it gets on my nerves a little bit. But anyways, I've been a teacher for about between 15 to 13 to 15 years. I need to actually sit down and do the math. It's been
Uh-huh.
a while. And I started helping out my brother with his English course that he had just made. I was his first employee, his first teacher. And but I actually graduated in translation. That's where my I got my degree from. But I've been working with teaching for many, many years. And I worked in different courses, different methodologies like I told you. The one that I actually enjoyed the most was the constructive methodology. First off, because I was working with kids most of the time, and I really enjoy that. But secondly, because it was probably the first time that I saw my students actually learning and having fun with the language. Because my experience until then was with students that were very frustrated with the courses that they had had before. They were very frustrated with the learning process. And I love teaching because I understand the importance that it has in people's lives. I understand that once you learn a new language, it opens a whole universe of possibilities for people. So I actually feel like I'm adding to people's lives, improving their quality of life even. But it was a little frustrating to always have to deal with students that were frustrated. So
Yeah.
teaching in this different methodology, this constructive methodology, was really interesting because I got to see kids having fun learning. And then I started to learn a lot. I got a lot. I incorporated a lot from that methodology into my current teaching style, so that my students can enjoy the classes as much as they are actually learning the more formal, the more boring aspects of it. So I like it. I like the game a lot.
It's nice. That's nice. Me too. I'm actually fascinated by the whole game. I thought it was cool when you said about, well, you said that you saw the students learning in a different way. I think that's a
Yeah,
cool little snippet of the experience as a teacher. We look at students and we observe them in their experience through the learning process, and we see when it's more difficult, when it's easier, when they enjoy it, when they don't enjoy it, when it's
oh,
relevant. You see that
definitely.
little light turning on. You know, it's different. It's a really cool experience to watch as a teacher a new or a different methodology that you didn't use before have a completely different effect, not only on the student's motivation, but also on like his results. I think that's really magic. It's kind of magical. It's
Yeah,
very
no,
crazy.
I agree.
It's pretty crazy. Yeah. Well,
It's a beautiful moment to see the light switch flip.
and how did you like start into teaching? Like you started with your brother in his school?
My first formal experience was in his English class, but
Uh-huh.
in his English course, but I because we grew up the way we grew up, if you want to
Uh-huh.
give context later, we can totally do that.
For
But
sure. Absolutely.
because we grew up the way we grew up, I would speak English in my house and with my siblings all the time. So I had friends from school or from the church or from wherever it was coming up to me and saying that they wanted to practice or something, but they were really shy. So my first experiences with teaching was actually sitting with friends in whatever situation, and playing like little quizzes, like, what color is this? Look at that, very good, very basic, but still just allowing people that I loved the opportunity to practice something that they either already knew or they were learning in a safe environment with someone that wasn't judging them, with someone that was praising them for the little things that they were doing. Sorry, a little bit of
Absolutely.
noise out here.
No, don't worry about it. I can't even
And
actually hear
oh, okay, cool.
it.
And I think that was one of the moments that made me realize the importance of learning a different language. Like amongst the many things that it can provide, it also helps your self-confidence. It boosts your self-confidence.
Absolutely.
And it was really beautiful to see my friends become prouder of themselves and happier because of something tiny that I had contributed to their life.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
cool.
So yeah,
That's
it's
amazing. Yeah.
yeah,
And how do you feel like, I mean, giving a little bit of context to how we grew up, right? We grew up in a missionary group. Um, that was like their lingua franca was like English, right? All kinds of
yeah,
communication was done in English. All kinds of interactions amongst like service centers and the different nucleuses, or how we would say call them communities, the different places that people would work in and live in. All of those interactions were mostly done in English or in the native country's language, right?
yeah.
So I guess we learned a lot of English through there. I think one of my main takeaways from that time was definitely a moment where my dad, he bought an external course, like it was a CLE. I don't know if you remember, Christian Light Education. It was a Mennonite course from the US.
Mm,
Um, these guys, the Mennonites and the Mormons, they have really good educational structures inside of their communities. I don't know how my dad found out about them, but somehow we started to buy their material and learn with their material. And one of the main things that I took away from that whole experience, studying at home, learning at home, being homeschooled, and things like that, was the quality of those specific books and the amount of hours that we had to practice when it came to learning language, when it came to learning English specifically. They taught us in those books about phonetics. It was the first time that I learned about,
really?
absolutely. They would have you draw macrons and breathes, the little signals that would
Hmm.
represent
That's
the
awesome.
pronunciation of the letters
How old
inside
were
of
you
this.
at this point?
I was probably maybe 9. I
That's
think it was
awesome.
1999, so I think I was 9. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I only started learning phonetics in college, and I fell in love with it. I love everything about the production of sound.
Mhm.
So, like pronunciation and stuff like that, and accents, and talking about accents or teaching different accents. I love it so much. But I didn't see it until I was much older. So I'm surprised that you got into it when you were really young. That's
Yeah, me
cool.
too. Me too. I was super surprised to even see that. For me, it was like natural because I was a kid. I didn't know what other approaches to language learning there were.
Fair.
So I was like, okay, I guess that's how we do it. So let's go. And then it really opened up my mind to learning Portuguese as well, right? With the whole different sounds that they make, paying attention to those things, like I would pay attention to it inside of the schoolroom. And I think that really made a big difference. And of course, inside of the group, inside of the missionary group, we had a lot of different people to talk to. And I think that's where the learning experience also expands and really gets the
Yeah.
meat. You really get the meat of learning through there. Like I think today we have a little bit of a discrepancy between the theoretical stuff that students learn and the practical stuff that they get through real life.
Absolutely.
And how do you manage that? I think that's my question, right? When you're dealing with your students, how do you make them aware of the type of exposure that they need, listening exposure, conversation exposure, and things like that? But also, how do you like create these experiences or create the opportunity for these things? Is that in somewhere part of the conflict of your teaching experience?
Definitely. I think um, teaching students that have learned English before in different courses, but they are again taking an English course because they have no one to practice with,
Uh-huh.
is probably one of the things that kind of hurts the most. Is like I really wish there was a community of English speakers that I could get my students involved in so that they could practice on a regular basis. But that was one of the ramifications of what you were talking about, and I kind of forgot the rest of them,
No,
which you
go
could
ahead
take
on that
a
one.
little
I
bit of
think that one's
ADHD.
great. Like hoping that your students get together in a community and talk about like
it's
and talk in English, right?
it's something that I've tried to do maybe once or twice, and it's something it's a project of mine for the future, maybe one day if I actually sit down and organize it and stuff. But um but to expose them to like real life English, or at least day-to-day English, actual English, not the more formal kind that we invariably teach because it's what we have today. um I give my students homework that relates to TV shows, music, things that are either new or that are constantly renewing their English vocabulary and structures. Um, and I also ask them to meet with people or to find people in their groups with whom
Hmm.
they can interact with. So I think that's how I try to keep it as current as possible. But yeah, it is a struggle unless the student is actually going abroad, or he intends to go and stay, or he has someone that is from there. He's going to get the English that I have, which
Absolutely.
is is good, obviously, but is not 100% current. I don't know all of the slangs anymore. I know what I learned, and I know what I know from the research that I do, but I'm not there. So, yeah, there's always a little bit of a gap. If they don't mind the gap, awesome. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that gap is definitely the individual's responsibility, and it does get filled with the individual's context. Like, I feel everybody has a little bit of a different context when we're talking about the lifestyle that we have and the things that we do on a regular basis. That does definitely impact um, the way we speak and the words we learn and
And
how our
people
language
want
develops
to.
overall, right?
Not just um sorry, not just what you do, but what you want.
Absolutely.
What are you
What
going
you're
to use that
interested, what you
for?
want.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That leads me to another question, which is about motivation, right? Like students, they come to class to learn English for a reason, and very few of them are because they're fascinated and they want it and they love it. You know, like those guys who are fascinated and they love it, they normally learn it on their own because they're fascinated and they love it. So they expose themselves to it. They learn things naturally, kind of actively exposing themselves to like music and different things that they consume. Naturally,
Yeah.
they are going to learn much more than the person who has a motivation like their job or has a motivation like anything else that is externally imposed or obligated or something like that.
Yeah.
And you talked a little bit about bringing in something new, right? Bringing in something
Right.
new, some different context to kind of boost and make the learning experience a little bit more fun, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And Stephen Krashen talked a lot about novelty, right? Talked
Sorry,
about
who?
bringing in novelty. Stephen Krashen, he's one of the oldest linguists in the world, kind of dinosaur. But
Okay. Mm.
I like a little bit of the stuff that he talks about. Other stuff I don't really agree with. I think he's a little bit old fashioned, kind of married to some of his beliefs, and I'm not really a big fan of that. Maybe we can talk about the different guys that we like. later.
Okay.
But when it comes to like novelty and making the student's experience a better experience in terms of the quality of learning that he gets and the amount of learning that he gets inside of a given time, what has been your experience in the different methodologies that you've used so far? Which ones have had an okay result for you? Which ones did you really not like? And which ones were like your favorite?
Okay. Um, so I'm going to rephrase your question just to make sure that I understood. You're
Absolutely.
asking where, like, where does the novelty come from? Right?
Well,
No, not exactly.
not exactly. Like the different
Okay.
methodologies will bring novelty, right? Like
Okay.
some methodologies will be the same as every other school. You know, you'll get a new book, similar exercises, similar
Okay. Yeah.
contexts, and things like that. But in other methodologies, you'll have similar skills, but
Okay.
different way of approaching and developing these skills, like TPR, where you have
Right.
total physical response and you say run and the person starts physically moving and you say pick it up from the floor and the person
Mhm.
goes and physically picks up something from the floor, or
Right.
you say butt kicks and the person does butt kicks, or like the
Mhm.
person's learning actions and things through actually moving their body, you know and doing manifesting the comprehension that they actually have,
Yes.
and that being a different methodology that brings in a little bit of a new element, which is the full body
Mhm.
response. Then you have TPRS, which is the teaching proficiency through reading and storytelling, where some people will just tell stories, crazy stories, super interesting stories about a spider who owned a food truck and he sold
Right.
bug pasta, and like the person who's paying attention, he's just like so enthralled in the sequence of these events because they're so different and new and kind of counterintuitive, that it allows for focus, novelty, attention,
Okay.
and
Right.
that kind of brings in those elements to the same skills that they're trying to develop, which is comprehension, vocabulary, and listening.
Right.
um, So my question is, with the different methodologies that you've tried, which ones
Mhm.
have been like your favorite? Which ones have been okay? And which ones would you just completely write off?
Okay. Well, for me as a teacher, I have a preference, but to be honest, it really depends on the student
Makes
because I
sense.
I have students that enjoy a more formal learning. They
Uh,
enjoy picking up the book and doing exercises, and some of them actually even get upset when you don't give them formal exercises with a little box with the information of how that grammar
Absolutely.
topic works and then the exercises below and then a use of that later. If you don't do it, they get a little upset and stuff. So it really depends on the student. But me as a
Absolutely.
teacher, I enjoy a more lively approach, a more active approach. So I really enjoyed the constructivist method, excuse me, because it was a lot like you were saying, like you say a word and the student goes and does it, and that's how they show that they're understanding what you're teaching them. And I enjoy it because it's active, it's lively, and the students that are involved in this kind of learning are usually having a lot more fun than the ones that are sitting down in front of a chair having to listen to you speak and then having to repeat whatever it is you're saying, or and then to talk to their fellow very nervously for a few minutes and then afterwards have to relay that to the rest of the class. It's it's more natural and it's more exciting. So I enjoyed the constructivist method because of that. But today, it doesn't have a formal name per se, the method that I'm using, but I really enjoy sitting with the student and asking them what they like to do, what their hobbies are, or how they got into the profession that they're in. And the ones that are not passionate about their profession
Uh-huh.
have some kind of hobby that they live for or they're excited about.
Yeah.
So getting to know the students and getting that excitement from them and then using that whatever topic that excites them to bring out vocabulary and structures and stuff like that. It's what works best for me and what I like the most to do because I can see that they're enjoying what they're learning. So even if it's not like for example, if they come to me and they say that they want business English, I will teach them business English, obviously. But if I can't captivate my student, eventually they're going to lose interest in the language, or it's going to be one more of those stories of, oh yeah, I went to a course and I studied for a year, but I learned nothing, or I learned a bunch,
Oof.
but I don't use it. Exactly.
Yeah.
the so I to me it's important to keep them passionate about what they're learning, to keep them excited.
Yeah.
So that's how I do it. That's how I like it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think there are a few approaches that use the student as the leader. I think when it comes
Yeah.
to um, learning autonomy, which is a real thing, the student is really the guy who knows what their experience is at that moment in their learning process. And they know the things that they're doing properly, the things that they're not exactly doing well. And it's not about them knowing that, okay, I am bad at this. No, it's like, I'm not sure how to use this. It's a question. It's a
Yeah.
lack of clarity. It's a reoccurring mistake that happens that they're kind of aware of. They don't really
Mhm.
know where they are in the learning process or exactly how to work out their difficulties, but using the student to guide the teacher through what their interests are, what is relevant to them, what is important to them, what their context is, and
Oh yeah.
consequently as well, like what their profile is, does definitely help. At least me as a teacher, and I imagine yourself as
Oh,
well,
definitely.
helps a ton in kind of finding the right approach and a good methodology that would engage the student in learning, which is really
Definitely.
the most important thing, I think. Engagement for students is something that's a little bit tough sometimes to do if you don't get the profile right. Have
Yeah. Exactly.
you ever had a situation where you uh,
I
mistook
misprofiled
the
someone.
misprofiled? Yeah.
I yes. But it was really odd because the misprofiling happened from what the student told me.
Okay.
They came up to me and they told me, "Look, I need English for marketing. I need English for marketing and I need to learn the grammar topics. Like I need you to teach me grammar because it's this is where my issues are." I'm like, "Okay." So I got a book. I got a marketing focused book it had a lot of grammar exercises. It had a lot of topics related to what she was asking of me. But then once I started teaching her, I noticed that she was getting very bored from the very first classes. The first two or three classes which are getting to know the student, it was fun and interesting, but then when it got more to the, okay, let's do the exercises, did you understand, how does this apply to your life, she was very like, I don't really want to do this. I was like, but okay, something is wrong,
Very
this is
interesting.
exactly what you asked for, but
Absolutely.
it's not working. So it took me a minute to kind of rephrase, like understand and reprofile that student, because in the end of the day, she works with marketing, but she's a lover of novelties and of more modern methodologies. She likes to talk. She likes to talk. She doesn't like to do exercises. She
Okay.
doesn't like to sit down and have to, and these exercises, like from school or other English courses where you had to sit down, read, process everything, and then, see how it applies, or all of that is very frustrating to her. She likes the let's talk and this is how you're going to teach me, just speaking. But it took a minute, and she was actually she I had only been teaching by then I had only been teaching for 3 or 4 years, so it was the first time that I had seen something like that, and it took me a minute because I thought that by then, no, I need to know what I'm doing. I'm a teacher, and this is what she asked for. I need to give her what she asked for. So what do I do? It was really conflicting because I didn't know what to do. I had to This particular student, I actually noticed that if I didn't figure it out, I was going to lose her. So I had a conversation with my boss, which was my brother at the time, and we agreed to kind of switch her days around. She went to a different teacher with more experience and everything, and then afterwards I had a bit of a training to learn how to profile students better and stuff like that. But it was a moment of tension there because I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know how to ask for help, who to ask for help, and I felt kind of guilty that I didn't know what to do as a teacher, you know?
Oh, it's so cute. I mean, my heart goes out to you for sure because
Mhm.
I've been there, and I come to the conclusion that when it comes to students and what they need, I feel it's very rare. Well, in my experience, it's been very rare for a student to honestly know what he needs and have the courage to do it. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel that a lot of students, they want things
Mhm.
for whatever reason, and it is connected to the things that they need at some point, but uh, I feel that it's the teacher's responsibility to not take it on as their responsibility to
Fair.
fulfill the desires of the student, and
Yes.
instead make the student aware of where he is, what he's doing, how he's doing it, and what you think can improve and should improve in that. So I feel when students put the onus on the teacher to kind of like do what I need, it's like, look, learning autonomy is a thing. So that is, what is learning autonomy? Right? It's the idea that the student kind of needs to be proactive.
Oh, yeah.
And student proactivity. Sorry, I'm just writing it down.
Cool.
Um, and he definitely needs to manifest his things that he wants. Like he wants grammar, he needs grammar, he feels that it's something that is important for him, and he wants to learn in a specific market, like marketing. So you go after the book, you go after the things he needs, you create the exercises for him, and in the middle of the way, you realize that that's not only what he needs, but it's not what engages for him. And you're like, okay.
Exactly.
So at that point, I feel it's a super big important step to let the student know where he is, and how you think he needs to improve. Like
Yeah.
raising students' awareness is a big deal as a teacher. So,
Yeah.
student, I understand that this is what you want. I understand that this is what you need. You work in marketing, you need grammar to structure your sentences properly. You need to have clarity in how to create sentences. I feel that's probably something that's not clear for you and it gets in the way when you're trying to
Mhm.
speak fluently because it's just not automatic yet. So I feel we could work on that for sure. But what we're doing right now is, from what I'm seeing, it's not really being engaged. You're not really engaging it very much. And
Yeah.
some things that are fundamental for learning to happen is focus. So if you're not engaged, your focus is going to be somewhere else.
Mhm.
And as a teacher, I need to tell you that we need to change this if you want to maximize your learning.
Yeah.
So adding an element that allows you to focus or that naturally is interesting to you or that is naturally novel to you, like these are elements that they actually foment focus. So it's not about, oh, let's get something new because it's fun. It's also about fun. but it's
Mhm.
mostly about fun to generate focus.
Especially when the student comes to you and they say, "Oh, how long is it gonna take for me to be able to be doing this and this and that and the other with the language?" And you're like, "It depends. Are you gonna study on your own? Are how often are we gonna have classes? Twice a week? 3 times a week? What is the level of commitment that you have to your personal studies at home? How much time are you dedicating per day to your studies? Are you going over all of the skills that you need to? Do you have people with whom you can practice? How are you exposing yourself to the language? Have you made adjustments to the technology, for example, around you, like the configurations of your cell phone? Have you put that in it? Like, especially to the students that come up and they say, "Look, I'm going to travel in the end of the year. I need to be able to interact with anyone and everyone in English, and I know nothing." I'm like,
Like, you know, nothing. Okay, that's
you do
fascinating. So let's
that.
talk about it, right? And I think those are really valid questions for sure. I ask the same exact question when students ask me that. It's like, look, with different methodologies, you're going to need a different time investment. With different techniques, you're going to need a different time and focus investment. So, how much
Yeah,
time do you have to invest? Let's
that is
start
a
from
really good
there.
question. Yeah,
Like, because it's not only about money, it's mostly about time and energy. So I tell my
awesome.
students all the time, it's like, look, it's if we have class once, twice, three, four, 5 times a week, you need to understand that outside of class, you need to be working just as hard so that in class I can see how you're developing, what are the pitfalls that you're falling into, you know,
Yeah,
what are the questions that your experience outside of class is creating so that inside of class you can actually resolve them. So if we
yeah,
have class once a week and you do nothing outside of class, your learning curve is just going to be so long. It's going to be huge,
yeah,
right? Because you're only investing that amount of time per week. Repetition and mistakes per unit of time is super important for you to improve a skill. And that's just
yeah.
talking about like general skills. We're not even talking about
Mhm.
specific language, but it does stay true as well with language. So
Absolutely.
practicing as much as you can, having as many errors inside of that space of time that you can, gives you the opportunity for plasticity, right? For you to actually change the things that you see in your errors. So
Yeah.
if you have none of that outside of class, guess what you're going to come into class with? The same stuff that you came outside of the last class with. And you don't want that to happen, right? So making students aware of the reality of the learning process is, I think, one of the most important uh, aspects of teaching and the
Yeah.
communication that we teachers need to have with students when they come up with things like I need this. I want this. I'm
Yeah.
going to travel at the end of the year. I have no idea what about English. I've never studied it, but I want to
Mhm.
travel. I want to be able to do everything that I have to do, buy things, order things, talk to people, ask questions, have conversations. And you're like, okay,
Mhm.
so let me just tell you what that takes. Raising students' awareness,
Yeah.
I think, is a super big part of the
Absolutely.
teacher's teaching process.
When do you usually have this conversation with the students? Do you have
Every
it like from the very beginning or whenever they ask?
from the
Or
very beginning. From the
awesome.
very beginning, it's important for them to know what they want.
Well put.
You know,
I usually in my first class, I usually give them an experimental class, and in that class I evaluate what level they're on. So I ask a bunch of questions related to English to see how much they already know.
mhm.
But I also ask what their past experiences were like, what their frustrations were, so that I know to avoid those. Which was actually something that I learned from the my misprofiling situation
Oh yeah, you can learn a lot
because
from mistakes.
exactly. The student comes up to me now and says, "No, I need grammar, I need this, I need that and the other. I'm like, okay, what frustrated you in this in your previous courses? I was very I was very traditional teaching, like very they didn't give us anything new. It was always by the book and everything. I'm like, okay,
Okay.
they're telling me that they need this, but they don't need it in this format. Like, okay, I'm gonna see how I can adapt this. There will be moments where I'm gonna have to go to the book to give you what you're telling me that you need, but we're gonna try to do it in a more fluid way.
Yeah.
But the conversation about how much time the student has to invest, I don't usually have with them in the beginning because I think it's a conversation that scares them.
Yeah, they
If
need to be
they
scared sometimes. I think they need to know the
if
reality. Kidding, just
perfect.
kidding. Go, go.
No, I agree with you. I think that if they come up with this demand of like, I need this in this amount of time, it's
Hmm.
perfect to address it the minute that they bring it up. But usually for my first classes, I give them an idea of what the skills are that they need to practice. So the language skills
Hmm.
and how much of that is requires an input of the English language and how much of it requires an output, and I bring them awareness in the sense that they need to interact with the world in English. You can't just expect English to get in you in a passive way. Learning
Absolutely.
is also an active um you have to do stuff.
Process.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So, yeah,
Sorry.
go for it.
Keep going.
No, no, no. So I have that conversation with them in the very beginning because I think we're not going to go anywhere if you expect me to give and me to give and me to give and you not to give anything back. So this is what we're doing. This is how it works. Is that okay with you? What can you commit to beyond the classes? Can you listen to music in English every day even if it's one song? It's English. Can you watch a TV show? Can you read a children's book? If it's beginner students, I usually recommend always starting with a children's book or a comic book like Monica's Gang or something. But those are for more like pre-intermediate because there's a lot of slang, a
Oh,
lot
for
of
sure.
jokes and stuff they're not going to get if they're very beginners.
I
But
like Peppa. I like to recommend Peppa Pig.
oh, that's a good one.
It's a really good one. It's
I go
fascinating how
for
they really well structure all of the sentences, very clear context, very clear realities, very short episodes. Um,
nice.
the
Oh, you
whole
mean the TV show,
A1,
not
A2,
books.
no, the TV show. If you're
Okay.
wanting to interact, if you want to talk, you need to work on your ears and mouth.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think that's a good way. Sorry, continue.
Cool. No, no. I was just kind of explaining how my first classes work because my first class works because that's usually the moment where the student comes up with the most questions or comments related to how the teaching is going to work, how the classes are actually going to work. But the like the time frame nowadays it's been rarer. I've had less students coming up to me and saying I need to do this in this amount of time. It has
Right.
happened, but it's been happening less. Um, so I only have the conversation about their time and how committed they are to their learning
Uh-huh.
after that. I mean, not after that.
Okay, no.
In that way, after that. In the beginning, I actually set commitments with them, small ones, but at least one activity for each skill.
Right.
So it
For
works
sure.
for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I really like to touch base with them in the very beginning.
Mm,
Every time I get a message from a student or a person who wants to study, um, they'll just pretty much tell me who told them about me or that someone told them about me,
nice.
and they'll just want more information. And the reality
Mm,
is that I need to have more information. Like, I don't work differently from most other teachers.
mm.
I'm going to be, of course, maybe some of the policies are going to be different. Maybe some of the methodologies, the techniques and practices are going to be different. But in general, um, payment, quantity, and things like that, it's
Yeah.
not very different. And for me to know what methodology I'm going to use with you, how long it should take for you to get to the goal that you want, and what your profile is, so how you're going to approach the things that you're going to need to approach in order to get the skills that you need for your goal. Like all of that I need to know. So
Yeah.
I actually start asking them a lot of questions from the beginning. Like I already asked them, okay, so what has your experience been with English? Oh, I've
Same.
never studied. I mean, I've studied in the past, but it's been a long time. I can read, I can understand a few words, but I need to research other words. So I immediately, because I know the CEFR, um, let's say list of descriptors, skill
Mm-hmm.
descriptors, you can already
Right.
start to understand where they fall into and have an idea of that. But
That's
I
really cool.
still need
I
to
don't
know
know that
more.
by heart yet.
Oh, yeah, I don't think you need to. At the end of the day, you just have it. Once you have it, you can already see, like, okay,
Yeah.
so beginners are going to have like very limited vocabulary. They're going to
Oh
understand
yeah.
one word here, one word there. You know, A1 is kind of like that. A2, they can already make like longer sentences, but in general, the person who they're talking to needs to speak slower, needs to
Right.
kind of make it easy and help them understand. And B1, B2 is a little bit more independent. It's normally where people kind of get comfortable because they know that they can do what they need to do. They don't speak
Mm-hmm.
perfectly, but they see that as long as I can travel and do the things that I gotta do, I don't really have
Mm.
to practice more English. And that's kind of where the plateau happens around B1 and
Okay.
B2. But at the end of the day, when a new student comes up to me and asks me questions, I try to answer them as clearly and honestly as possible. If they ask me about prices, I'll tell them all of my price ranges. Say,
Oh.
look, I have from here to here. Depends what you're gonna do, what you're gonna need, and what your goal is.
Mm.
So I work with these type
Well.
of methodologies. I work with this amount of profiles with these type of students, and this is how much it costs from here to here. But for me to define exactly how much your package is going to be, because I have different ones,
Mm-hmm.
let's talk a little bit more. And if your problem or the goal that you have is something that I don't work with, I can also recommend you to another professional who can definitely do that much better,
Cool.
who actually works with that. So I feel that's a really good start, a very clear and open start to, like, okay, are we going to work together or are we not? Let's see, right? And
Yeah.
then I think that's pretty much it. I have a a conversation actually from a recent student, actually this the end of this month,
Hmm.
who contacted me. If you want to check it out, if you want to see it, I can
Oh,
share
sure.
it with you. Let me
Okay.
just put it over here and then we can talk about it. Let me
Cool.
just share it here. Oh, right. So let me see if I can just cover her. No, I can't cover her. I wanted to cover her, how can I say? Her
Her
phone
name,
number.
confidential. Huh.
Yeah, just her,
Oh.
her phone number. But I guess I'll just read it. Right? So she says, boa noite, meu nome é X. Me passaram seu contato para aulas de inglês online. Gostaria de informações, por gentileza. Like, boa noite, Cecília, tudo bem? Claro, você já estudou inglês antes, foi nivelada, ou já tem alguma ideia das suas competências com inglês? Like, what are the things that you can do? Let's start with that.
Mm. Okay.
And then she says, oh, eu já fiz inglês no passado, mas faz muito tempo, consigo ler, mas tem algumas palavras que preciso pesquisar. Consigo ouvir quando é falado mais devagar. Agora, para falar é meu lado mais fraco. Atualmente não estou conseguindo, acabo misturando tudo. E outra coisa que acho legal falar é que minha língua nativa é o espanhol, mas moro no Brasil há 5 anos. Like, okay, amazing. And then I answered her in audio.
Ah, excelente. Dá para entender um pouco melhor sobre seu nível.
Excelente.
Vamos lá. Vamos marcar uma entrevista, tá?
Oh, yeah, I told her, vamos marcar uma entrevista para a gente conversar sobre o seu perfil, sobre aquilo que você precisa, eu entender um pouco mais sobre você. And then she said, beleza, mas tipo, para ter uma ideia, as aulas são individuais ou grupais, ou mais ou menos como é o seu método? Meu objetivo é para conseguir ler mais rápido artigos. This is where we start with the kind of unrealistic or disconnected expectations to what English classes are, right? Meu objetivo é para conseguir ler mais rápido artigos. Like low, so speed reading, I don't do speed reading, right? I don't work with
Yeah.
speed reading. Speed reading is for another professional, and I ended up telling her that later. Conseguir apresentar em inglês. So she's already looking for like a B1, B2 level
Yeah.
language to present things in English in front of an audience. What are you going to present? Are you going to present something that nobody's going to ask questions about? If no one's going to ask questions about and you just need to memorize a presentation, you can do that with whatever English level you have. As long as you don't need to interact and you just need to memorize, you don't even need to speak the language.
True.
You know, so I can teach you that in like a few weeks. However, let's talk more about it, right? E para conseguir ouvir também apresentações em inglês. So she wants to present and listen to presentations.
Right.
Que a depender do sotaque, às vezes nem consigo entender muito. Sou médica, acabei agora a residência. Meu marido também tem interesse. Ele nunca fez inglês, mas tem uma ideia básica. Ele ainda é residente, então por isso perguntava um pouco se as aulas são individuais para ver se ele conseguiria pela questão do tempo. O objetivo dele é o mesmo. So, if we're talking about two people who are beginners, apparently, and who want to learn how to present things in English and have enough comprehension so that they can listen to presentations in English and read articles faster, that's when I'm going to start to say, okay, reading articles, I don't do. And that's what I told her immediately. Like reading articles faster, speed reading. Yeah, no, other people work with that. And for you to be able to do that, you need actually to have a higher level of comprehension for you to do that. So you're already asking for a skill that's way ahead of the first skills that you need to develop, just so you know, which is gaining experience with vocabulary, learning vocabulary, not only visually, but also with your listening. You need to be able to understand a lot of it, right? To be able to reproduce a lot of it. So I tell her about that. I tell her about the presentation preparation, that in order for her to make clear presentations, she needs to, number one, know her shit very well.
Definitely.
So that she's calm in talking about it in front of a lot of people.
Right.
If there are a lot of things that are unclear, a lot of insecurity starts to happen, especially in front of the people, and that just raises anxiety, and then the emotional level of the person in that context can make even an advanced person sound like a beginner just because they're so involved emotionally.
It happens in their native language. It's going to happen in the forward one.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying, you know?
Yeah.
So I pretty much tell her about this. I said, listen, if you want to work on presentations, I really have to see your level to see if you're capable of doing it. Because if you are at a B1, B2 level, where you can understand a little bit more and communicate very clearly about a few different topics that are familiar to you, then, you know, it's very possible that you'll be able to do it in a little while. But I don't know that yet, right? So let's see your level a little bit more and let's have a conversation in real life. And she says, entendi. Seriam apresentações tipo interativas. It's like, exactly. Yeah. So for that, you definitely need to improve your level so that you can understand people asking questions on the fly.
Yeah.
Right? Conseguindo responder eventuais questionamentos e me comunicar com outras pessoas no caso de ir a congressos e tal. So she's already asking for a really high ask, right?
Yeah.
And so, again, as a teacher, I need to tell her, okay, that's a longer term goal.
Yes.
And it depends a lot on you, because I can give you all of the exercises for you to have 30 to 40 minutes of listening and exposure daily, or more. Just have to do more exercises. But it would really depend on how much of that and how actively you do that, so that then we can have an idea of the effect that it's having on your learning process. And with the effect, we can kind of understand how long it's going to take,
Cool.
you know,
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
because the average of how long it takes is this. If students do this every day, or this much every day, or do this actively every day, or focus on this when they're doing the exercises every day, that's the average. But let's talk about your reality, right?
Yeah.
And then I just scheduled the interview, and then later she says, "Obrigado. Quando teria disponibilidade para entrevista?" I tell her the schedules, we set it up, and that's when we have the conversation, right? And that's when I really ask them all about what their motivation is. If they tell me work, I immediately tell them that's a super weak motivator. I,
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to. I have to. I think as a teacher, that's probably in my opinion, right? That's one of our main goals. It's like make the student aware of where he is in
Absolutely.
the journey,
Yeah.
and so that he can take concrete steps in the direction that he wants to go, and not
Yeah.
expect to take a huge step in a shorter amount of time and then get disillusioned with that. Because if students have unrealistic expectations, and as a teacher, I don't let them know that it's an unrealistic expectation, and I try to help them get there,
Mm-hmm.
they probably won't get there with the expected time and the expected skill level that they want. And that is most probably gonna end up being blamed on me as a teacher,
Yeah. Nah. Yeah.
because I said that it was possible and that I supported this whole process. And now that we're at the whatever 6 month mark or 1 year mark, they're still not there. It becomes a bad mark on me as a teacher if I don't let them know, like, yeah, that's going to take more than a year. Oh, that's going to take this much time. If you only have that much time to invest, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of the learning journey, is making the student aware.
Touching on this,
Uh-huh.
like making them aware and giving them a good idea of what they're going to need, what to expect.
Yeah.
Have you ever looked at SMART goals? Do you know what they are?
Yeah, like the measurable, achievable,
Yeah.
yeah, goals. Yeah, those are cool for students. I have never used them. I've used
I
them
tried
just for events.
I tried a couple of times, and though it's possible to use them, it requires the student to be very autonomous about the goals
For
that he's
sure.
setting.
For sure.
So, though I tried it a few times, I've probably explained this and gone over them with the students, like with at least 5 different students.
Uh-huh.
They all enjoyed the idea and were very motivated by it but they struggled with the actually defining how to fit the language into the SMART goals.
Mm,
So invariably we ended up like not touching that again, and not going there. But I think what you said you do, it's very important for a teacher to do, and I think it's really great when the student knows, like, has a real idea of how long it's going to take him to learn exactly what he's asking for. Because when they say, "Ah, I want to talk, I want to go, and I want to," they can come and they can have class for as long as they want. But when they know, look, I want to be able to make presentations and to listen to questions and interact, that specifically, you can give them a very specific um, time, not exactly the timeline, but based on
yeah, for sure.
how much time they put in of studies at home, you can tell them, look, this is something that we can do within such and such amount of time based on your level or something. I think that's great.
No, for sure. For sure. And I think um, they need to understand their ask, right? What are they asking for? You know?
Hmm.
So when it comes to that, I really enjoy using this because it's just It's just so clear, you know, it
Do you mind
makes
sending me
things
that
much
later?
easier. Oh, absolutely. So
Thank you.
here you have the different skills, and you have them in a self-assessment grid, right? So you
Nice.
have the different skills, different abilities
Mm-hmm.
described by the different levels. So here,
Okay.
for example, you have the speaking, right? Reception, which
Right.
is the understanding.
Okay.
So at all levels, you have different levels of understanding. At all levels, you have different levels of speaking. So when a student says, "Oh, I want to talk," I want to be able to talk. Like, okay. So let me just tell you how that evolves. Okay. So where are you? I like to have that conversation with the student in the interview. Where are you?
Nice.
I'm going to read some skills and I want you to tell me which ones resonate with you.
Cool.
So I'm going to say, like, I can recognize very simple, familiar words inside of familiar phrases like my brother, my mom, brother, sister, or motherfucker, whatever. Like in a sentence, right? I can
Yeah.
understand individual words like fulano, Siqueira. I can understand, these very basic words concerning myself. So like
Right.
old, boy, girl, whatever. My family, right? My
Mm-hmm.
family, my brother, my sister, my cousin, and
Okay.
immediate concrete surroundings. So like water, you know, like the things that are around me, white wall,
Mm-hmm.
or white maybe, just like individual, very basic and familiar phrases or
Right.
words,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Isolated
I,
vocabulary of specific themes.
exactly. And when people speak slowly and clearly, right? Oh, I can understand. Yeah, that makes sense. That's kind of what I feel. Amazing. And then I'll just go talking about the different ones and I'll ask them questions. Right. So in this part of interaction, I'll definitely ask them questions and see how they interact. So like if in this case where it says I can interact in a simple way, provided the person is prepared to repeat or rephrase things at a slower rate of speech, right? Then the
Mm-hmm.
person's like, oh yeah, that's exactly when I can interact. If the person speaks slowly and repeats a little bit or like changes their sentence, I can definitely understand and it works. Okay, so you're probably
Awesome.
here. Like they immediately relate to their own level. I don't like to level them as much as I let them level themselves just by describing the skills to them.
Nice.
Because I
Cool.
think the way that I used to do it at Visa was like leveling them. It's like, okay, you're this. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, how about you see for yourself who you are?
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Then you can just go. And then I can ask and answer simple questions in areas of immediate need on very familiar topics. So in this moment, I'll ask them stuff about their family immediately. I'll be like, okay, so my family is very big. I have my brother Eman, I have my brother Danny, my brother Samuel, my brother Diego, my sister Katrina, my sister Nicole, my sister Michelle, my sister Luna, my sister Mariana. I've got 9 siblings. So tell me about yours. How many siblings do you have? Like, and then I'll just kind of expand on those very familiar contexts, very immediate things around them. I work at home, right? I work from home. Where do you work? Do you work at a company? What company? Very short
Mm-hmm.
questions and short answers to see how they interact in that sense. And I'll go expanding if they go answering it clearly, concisely, and objectively. I'll just go going to the next level and going to the next level. And it's interesting
Awesome.
because at this point you can start to see that sometimes there is a discrepancy between the skills. Like people
Mm.
will understand when, for example, if we go to write, they can probably write a little bit more than they can speak. You know, they can probably
That is
read a
interesting.
little bit more than they can listen. And you start to
Mm.
understand the discrepancies between these skills. that it's never like the person's rarely an A1 only in all those skills.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're a mix of A2 and A1. You know, sometimes
Fair.
they're a mix. It's very common to have a mix of A2 and B1, the different
Yeah,
skills.
if the
So
person's transitioning between skills, they're usually going to have things in between, a bit of both.
absolutely, in their evolutionary process, they're definitely going to have a little bit of both at some point. But
Yeah.
their context also makes them more capable of doing some things than others. Like some people only practice their English in
Oh
writing
yeah,
and speaking.
absolutely.
So they're like
Absolutely.
they can actually read and write a lot of things, but they can't
Yeah.
actually speak any of that, or
Fair.
they can speak that at a very uh, disproportionate level.
I currently have a student who is he's getting his doctorate in in environmental engineering.
Mhm.
Like, dude is reading complex articles every day. His reading and his reading level is very high. His writing level is almost as high. His speaking level is good, but he makes way more mistakes than he does when he writes. So, yeah, perfect. Your example was perfect. Not example. Your statement is very accurate. Like, yes, sometimes when the student is exposed very much to the practice of some particular skills, he's going to be better at that.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
just the reality of things.
Yeah, for sure. It's a really big skill discrepancy. I would say super, 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 and it happens. You know, so like to understand their skill discrepancies and to understand what I have to do with them, even if I
Hmm.
can do what I need to do with them, I need to really go into what their skills are. And then once that's done, then great. Then I can tell them like in very clear terms where they are, how they, what their skills seem to be, and they have gone through this process with me, so it makes sense for them. It's not like I'm telling them something as an institution or as a teacher with all this knowledge and all of this information and authority. It's like we're just like observing things together and being like, okay, so this is where you're at. This makes sense. This is what you saw you could do very well. I felt you could do this very well. How did you feel about that? Oh yeah, I felt that when I was
Hmm.
talking about my family, it was fine. But when I started talking about my work, it was much more tough. Yeah, when you started describing your family, that was a little bit more difficult too. You started to get a little bit lost there. But there were some things before that you were saying actually very naturally. It seems like you had a lot of experience in those things. Yeah, we would talk a lot about that in our in my last course. Like, we had a lot of those types of classes where we talked a lot about those things. Amazing. Yeah, so that happens. But yeah, the the skill discrepancies, I think, is a big part of letting students know where they are, and it's one way to touch base to know where to start and where to go with the student.
Yeah.
All
Awesome.
right.
Okay.
We talked a lot about stuff. We talked
We
about student-led teaching, where you let the student kind of lead you through the process of what they need and so forth, what they want, what their difficulties are. We talked about student profiling and motivation, right? How sometimes we profile the student incorrectly, um, or just trust blindly in what they bring to us. We might not, you know, foment the
Yeah.
motivation that they probably need,
Yeah.
specifically when students come and say, I need to do it for my job, and you realize they hate their job. Like, that's the worst motivation. Learning autonomy. We talked about learning autonomy and student proactivity. We also talked about the commitment of time, investment in the
Yeah.
student side, right? How much they are willing to invest to get to where they need to go.
Right.
Smart goals. That's very interesting. I'm going to take a look about that into that as well. And skill discrepancies. We talked about those things as well,
Yeah.
right?
All
So
right.
for today, that's it. Thank you so much for coming.
Awesome.
And why don't you tell people where they can find you online, where you're at, what you do?
Okay. All right. Currently I don't have a professional profile yet, but that is in the works. It'll be coming out
Amazing.
soon. However, you can find me on Instagram. I'm at joycsg, and I'll see you then.
All
All
right,
right.
amazing. Joy
All right, Mickey, thank you so much for
CSG.
having me.
Thank you. It's amazing. Big kiss. Bye bye.
Bye-bye, man.